I was on mute, okay, for the participants. Okay, sorry. So welcome to this session on digitalization impacts on humanitarian stock flow. You will get an update on humanitarian logistic data bank and ASIREC. Today in Geneva, we will talk about this humanitarian logistic data bank that employs automatic tracking of aid movement based on customs transactions data from ports, airports, and other entry points. It provides the global humanitarian community with real-time information on the exact positioning of critical items such as food, medicine, and shelter, making the information available to both parties, donors and recipient countries. The platform aims to improve information sharing, balancing stocks level across the humanitarian hubs set for the purpose of humanitarian assistance, and enhancing the collaboration and working together among the same humanitarian hubs. Furthermore, it will help avoid bottlenecks in ports and airports. We have the honor today to have Mr. Giuseppe Saba, the CEO of the International Humanitarian City. So please, sir, can you please provide us with a high-level overview of this unique project? Thank you.
Thank you, Virginie. Very good morning to who has a clear role in emergency response. I'm talking about head of civil protections or prime minister offices and so on. This is something that is coming from the humanitarian community, how to help the governments in the preparedness for emergency response. During the last couple of days, I believe that we are more and more focusing on this particular topic on how to help governments. And myself, I assisted and I had, let me say, the opportunity of assisting to a presentation from Flora, from EPSUS on the Stockholm platform. Now, yesterday morning, I had a very good chat with him. And what we believe is that we are doing both a job that should be really an extremely value added for the government. From one side, let me clarify, the humanitarian logistics data bank developed by the humanitarian community within the International Humanitarian City in Dubai is using and tracking the customs transactions. The one of Stockholm platform is using more the warehouse management system. The one that we ideated within Dubai is much more focused on those humanitarian hubs which are hosting stocks for international appeal and international response, while, correct me if I'm wrong always, the Stockholm platform is much more focused on national stocks, but does not mean that the two information should take at certain point a common route in order to help again the countries affected by disasters. Of course, this is going to be also an advantage for the humanitarian organization. So, bottom line, when a couple of years ago in Dubai, we asked ourselves how we can help the countries, we try to put ourselves in the shoes of those people having a certain responsibility, and saying, okay, what is going to happen in the event of an emergency? Prime Minister Office or the head of civil protection is going to call the UN resident coordinator. We know very well our diplomats are not absolutely technicians, and they are going to call one by one all the agencies or the big international humanitarian organizations in order to get a clear idea what is preposition for international humanitarian response. I'm going to ask a couple of minutes of your attention, and I'm going to show you the witness of some head of agencies or former head of agencies through a short video. Jihad, could you please share the video with the audience? Thanks.
Communication between various humanitarian organizations is a daily necessity. This need is insinuated when disaster strikes. However, time is never on their side. This is Dubai's International Humanitarian City, and here we respond on time. Imagine a platform that allows real-time information sharing on a humanitarian aid stocks and flow, providing the global humanitarian community with information on the exact positioning of critical relief items, their quantity, location, ownership, and movement. You don't have to imagine it. It has become a reality. Introducing the Humanitarian Logistics Data Bank.
The deal is that if a disaster strikes, people will be able to see what supplies where.
The Humanitarian Logistics Data Bank marks a milestone for corporations amongst the humanitarian actors in regard to emergency preparedness and response.
Logistics makes or breaks many of the operations we're involved in.
This will help the United Nations and our NGO partners do something we were never able to do before.
The data bank ensures a global mapping of aid, improves coordination, and documents humanitarian assistance to better serve those in need.
Having the data bank will increase the effectiveness and efficiency of the use of the facility.
By employing automated tracking of aid movement based on customs data from ports, airports, and other entry points, the data bank allows record-time response to humanitarian crises.
This database is really going to save lives, save money, and do, I think, immeasurable good around the world.
Furthermore, this tool avoids overlaps of a humanitarian aid and optimizes interventions. The data bank gives both affected countries and humanitarian actors in crisis-torn areas access to updated information on the availability of relief items in humanitarian depots and warehouses. Today, in Dubai's International Humanitarian City and in the humanitarian hubs of Italy and Panama. Tomorrow, in other humanitarian hubs, and the replication goes on to accommodate the 11 international humanitarian hubs around the world.
Thank you. So substantially what's happened is that a few years ago, the humanitarian community in Dubai decided to map
communication between various humanitarian.
Yeah, thank you. We decided to map more than 5,000 line items and to start in identifying the right HS codes. Of course, crossing the HS code data with the company data, because we know very well, even the humanitarians organization, they have a company code. We were able to trace exactly the movement of the humanitarian aid. Now, I hope that we are going to get the physical online dashboard. And what we did is that step by step, we started in identifying the most correct HS code for each line item. And this step, of course, took some time. We are strictly monitoring the transaction, even physically. We have a dedicated staff member who's going to cross-check that is going to be used the right HS code, because do not forget that for some organization, the custom procedures are moved directly by the organization. For some other, they are using agents that sometimes they are trying to do the job quite quickly and risk to mismatch the HS code numbers. And this is something that risks to bring into big mistakes. So we are monitoring. We did it in Dubai together with the customs authorities. We worked quite a lot with the Panama customs. With both of them, we signed an agreement of cooperation. The same we did with the customs of Italy, but still, as you know, we have other humanitarian hubs which are hosting stocks for international response, starting from the Australia in Brisbane, passing through Guangzhou in China, then Dubai, then in Jordan, then Kenya, Cameroon, Italy, and as well as in Ghana, Panama. So quite a lot of the humanitarian hubs, but the dialogue is directly with the officials, the custom officials. So International Humanitarian City is a government entity. So I'm representing the government of Dubai. So I'm dealing with other hosting governments. So it's a dialogue among governments. The humanitarian community, of course, is already cooperating. But the most important part here, because it's the huge challenge, is to get the customs on board. Of course, that we are not putting our fingers into the customs systems, but the customs are pushing the data into the humanitarian logistics data bank. What you are seeing in the screen now is the total stocks that are seated in between UAE, Panama, and Italy. And let me give you something in particular in terms of data. Let's just go back to 2017, just to give you the idea on the efforts that we did. And in Dubai, we used to have a total of $43 million of stocks. And if you look even the health stocks, we were talking about approximately 11%. So $5 million of stocks. If you go into the 2019, most probably you start in appreciating how the stocks are growing. So 88 millions with $30 million of approximately of health stocks and the other clusters. Up to the 2021 or 2022, where we have another increase of stocks. Now, here, as you can see, we are talking about 140 million versus, again, another $56 million of health stocks. Now, those data for us, at least for me as a CEO of the International Humanitarian City, is extremely clear. I needed to adopt immediately the flexibility in order to expand the capacity of IHC in hosting stocks under temperature control and increase immediately also the cold chain. So, and that was what we did immediately. And simultaneously talking with the colleagues of WHO, we started in seriously reflecting that it was time to establish a center of excellence for not only for humanitarian logistics, but in particularly focused on the health logistics. So those are the inputs that we are receiving from the dashboard. Now, why we are representing dollars instead of number of beneficiaries? Because, Jad, could you please click into the shelter, for example, because the stock owners are various organizations. Yes, we are able to tell you exactly how many beneficiaries we can serve with those stocks, but we prefer to give a restricted access to the technicians, to the technical people, to the humanitarian community, in order to get a clear idea on number of beneficiaries, because they are going to fully understand that those numbers are obtained in the combination of the full presence of the stocks and not absolutely by identifying organization by organization. So we prefer to give a particular access to those that are fully involved in the humanitarian action more than to give a general access to everybody. Just to keep in mind that today the information is available to everybody into the website of IHC, and step by step we hope to share this kind of information with all the concerned agencies, and this is the same discussion that I had with for the Stockholm platform with Ipsos in the past few days. Now let's just go into the outbound, because also the outbound is an extremely important data for us. Okay, in the outbound, you can get the total value of the item dispatched, but also the number of countries that we served. Again, if we go back to the 2017, you will see something, and I'm talking about pre-COVID, the number of dispatches, the number of countries served, sorry, it was on 93 countries with $74 million. And if you look even the various clusters are quite equally divided. Now, of course, the logistics or the shelter usually used to be the most strongest stocks, and in particular in emergency, also the telecommunication are usually high value. But if I should go now into the 2021 or 2020, during the COVID period, you will see that the numbers are increasing exponentially again in terms of stocks dispatched, in terms of countries served, but again, a period where the 50% of the stocks were moved for COVID purpose. And if we should go into the summary, you will see other interesting data. Let's go into the 2019 Jihad pre-COVID. In the pre-COVID, you will see that WFP was on the top, let's say, of the movement for relief items. Don't be surprised when we refer to WFP. Here we are talking about UNHRD. We are talking about the GVLP, the Global Vehicle Leasing Program. We are talking about the FITEST, the telecommunication cluster that is managed by WFP and so on. So under the name of WFP, try to read all of those cluster on typology of the items. But again, if you look, even the top 5 line items, we are talking about shelter or water and sanitation and so on. But if we move in the COVID period, again, you have a clear picture on what is happening here. So those are extremely relevant information for ourselves. There is also another point, in my opinion, that is going to be extremely helpful into this logistics data bank, but also in the mechanism into the Stockholm platform, to look carefully on the level of stocks that we are going to preposition in the various humanitarian hubs. We are assisting today, unfortunately, during the Ukrainian crisis, the movement of stocks coming from the most bizarre and remote areas. Now, is it really because there is no space in the most closed humanitarian hub? We have two humanitarian hubs in Europe that I mapped. One is in the Canary Islands and the other one is in the southeast of Italy. Or is due to the fact that we didn't preposition well in terms of quantities, in terms of type of items into those humanitarian hubs? This is what I'm expecting to see in terms of help for the humanitarian community in order to better understand which are the level of those stocks that should be prepositioned in the various hubs. And this is going to really help the community in order to perform the most cost-benefit operation, because it's this is a clear issue. So, especially when we talk about funding, and again, if we continue to analyze data by data, year by year, you will see that there is a very strong advantage in general when we talk about data. Now, we are extremely rich of data, and we are continuously touching base with all the hosting government of the various humanitarian hubs. Again, I repeat, this is not an easy journey. It is a challenge journey. We need to ensure customs that we are not absolutely, let me say, tapping into their own system. They want to be granted about the security, the safety, and so on, but simultaneously, let me say, working together with them, we can get exactly where we went together with the countries that are already on board. This is something that, honestly speaking, we attempted in the past 20 years, most probably several times. It has been attempted together with OCHA. It has been attempted by several organizations. I believe that we have to do this effort if we want to get there. I prefer to stop and to, let me say, to save some minutes in case of questions. I had recently a couple of interesting meetings also during the Expo 2020 in Dubai. We will see later on Virginie inviting the CEO of nybl. How can I define? It's an extremely young company. And Noor, the CEO, after having explained to him what we were doing with the Humanitarian Logistics Data Bank, came back to me with a bizarre question. What are you waiting for applying artificial intelligence to the Humanitarian Logistics Data Bank? And I said, wow, it might be really extremely helpful. And I'm pretty sure that with the support of nybl, we can go really very far. Because at a certain point, once I look what is doing Ipsos with the Stockholm platform, what we are doing today as International Humanitarian City, other elements of information on what is seated, for example, within the various suppliers, I'm pretty sure that in the future, really we can call immediately from the closest place the humanitarian relief item, whatever we need for responding to operation. Thank you, Virginie.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. It's a very, very impressive tool, and we can imagine that there is a lot of work behind the development of this digital platform, and capturing and presenting the information is very important to the humanitarian community and others. Therefore, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Anjun Sadakat, the CEO of Intellytics, the developing company of the Humanitarian Logistic Data Bank, to share his experience in developing the data bank and highlight the main challenges and what additional features can be added in the future. So please, sir, over to you. Please introduce yourself, and you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'll share my screen. A brief introduction to my company, which is Intellytics. I myself have spent a lot of time in the industry. I'm a chartered accountant by profession. And we formed this company about 11 years ago, and effectively specializing in data analytics. And we have offices around the globe, in Asia, in the Middle East, of course, where we're based, but also in the US and Europe. And very quickly, what we try and help customers do is to use their data in a way that connects them to the real problem, either profit from it or grow from it, or in this case, help others with logistics. We specialize in a number of areas, but logistics analytics is one of them. And you can see a number of customers that we service. It's about 3 years ago that Giuseppe reached out to us, and we'd done another project for Ministry of Health, where we had connected their hospitals live so that the doctors could see and the hospital teams could see which beds were available and what types of patients there are. And he identified that there was a need for bringing analytics and this whole connectivity to the humanitarian aid, which of course involves goods coming in, they need to be warehoused, and they need to go out to the affected areas. And really, if you really think about the entire process, it's a very simple one. But we in technology sometimes tend to complicate things. And either by design or just pure coincidence more than anything else. I think there's been a lot of effort, as Giuseppe mentioned in his talk. A lot of other organizations have been working towards this with a lot of success. But where I would like to focus on is how we partnered with IHC and really started to identify some of the areas that were restricting us from providing this level of service and the data that the humanitarian community so needed. The big challenge was that there were lots of members with lots of, if you like, countries and hubs that are all contributing to this. And the idea to connect all of them into a single database, while it seems logical, has been quite a challenge for a number of years and for a number of reasons. The other part that I guess complicates the entire issue is also different countries have different custom, even though they are all dictated by the HS code. But in practice, we realized that not everything was being followed as guided. And on top of that, we also have clearing agents that work with the members who clear the goods, both from an inbound and outbound standpoint. So one of the things that we realized that the quality of data being sourced was not of the right standard, and that we really needed to do something about that. The data collection also was a huge challenge because, as you can imagine, every member would have a different IT system. They would have different processes and procedures. They would have different standards. And that became quite a nightmare to deal with. So we started to think about what do we do in terms of data collection? And then all of that, once we had it in, needed to be provided to the members so that they can manage and monitor their stock positions and also where the goods are going and what types of goods were being shipped out. Again, this is not rocket science, but this is something that has been a challenge for the humanitarian community for many, many years. And we don't claim to have solved everything, but I think we've taken the first step in identifying. And I'd just like to take you through some very simple slides that would form the basis of what we developed. The first one we concentrated on was pure data quality. We needed to get the standards right, which means that the definitions needed to be absolutely accurate across all hubs, across all clearing agents, across the number of custom agencies that we are dealing with. And so in order to do all of those proved to be quite tough because the systems aren't in place, technology isn't all there, and a lot of work was currently being done on paper, basically, and then being input into a system. And one of the things that we identified very earlier on as one of the key issues is, well, if we've got, let's say, 15 different definitions of what tents were being classified as, or canisters, water canisters were being classified as, then how do we use the existing practices, but at the same time, develop something of our own that would harmonize some of these definitions into standards that we can follow, which meant that we didn't want all of our partners to change their existing practices, but we decided to make the change at our end. And that's really where a lot of our work, I would say the success of what you've seen today, 80% would be on data cleaning and data quality and defining standards. The rest was a lot easier once we had those in. So this was a huge, huge challenge. The second big challenge we had was how do we map the number of different stock items that our members had. Some of them were using different technologies. Each one of them had different stock unit codes and item keys. How do we map all of those to an HS code that even in the long term would then be usable and easy to follow, which meant that not only going forward would we have new codes being defined and used in the system, but also historic data needed to be changed as well. And so we underwent with IHC's team and our member partners with that, and a huge data mapping exercise. As Giuseppe mentioned, I believe the number of stock keeping units were in excess of 7,000. And we then brought them down to a standard definition of about 1,500. And that's what we would call clean data. And that took a very, very long time to do and a lot of thinking. And the way we've structured our internal codes, if you like, is a combination of using codes from the members, using the custom HMS code, and then generating specific keys within our own tool set that allow us to then kind of map everything in the right structure and the right way. And that, for me, is a huge undertaking, and I think it's now we're beginning to see really good results coming out, and everybody's feeling a lot more comfortable with the quality of data that's being reported. The third piece was, how do we collect real-time accurate data? And the key was not once a process had been run. The key was, how can we automate where you didn't have computerized clearing systems like you may have in Dubai, for example. So we wanted to connect the agents, the members, and the customs officials so that everything can be done within a application that can be filled out for either import or export, and have the customs use that to approve and basically give us a go-ahead that this is the right data. Now, within that tool, the first two elements of data quality and data management that we brought in were automatically pre-built. So now you have an application where any member or their clearing agents cannot select items that are not already in our master tables, which means that the definitions are exactly the same. The classifications are exactly the same, and they're all mapped to proper HS codes that customs also recognize. And so there was a lot of harmonization, and that was launched about 6 months ago, and I'm happy to say both Panama and Italy are using it. And we are hoping that as we grow from the existing 3 hubs to 11, where you don't have a computerized custom systems, if you like, this tool can be used to collect and reflect exactly what a good standard system would do. And that really was a big challenge for us as well. So what we've tried to do is push the data quality at the time of capturing the data, whether it's import or export, and whether it's a member filling the forms out, or whether it's the clearing agents and even customs approving it. The idea that if we can capture it accurately as per our standards at the source, then everything else will become easy. And we're beginning to now see that come to life, and which is very gratifying, I must say. So effectively what we've done is we've taken a number of members, multiple hubs that will be coming on, and we've structured the data, and we've developed a template that we can now just roll out from one region and one hub to another in a very, very short period of time. I think over the last 3 years, we've all learned a lot, mostly on the complications that exist in markets. And we've tried to overcome and even predict what could be some potential issues that may arise in other markets. And we've built those in already. Now, all of this data, all of these master tables and applications actually all sit on the cloud. And we then serve the dashboards or the information through dashboards. It's available on mobile. And we have self-serve tools, and for the analyst, OLAP analysis for deep dive into more details if need be. As you can well imagine, dashboards contain a high-level information where you can see 36,000 feet view of where you are and where you're going and where you've been. But if you really wanted to do some deep dive analysis, then OLAP analysis is the best way to go. And the last real challenge for us was, how do we deliver all of that? So the challenge Giuseppe and the team tasked us with was, it needed to be mobile friendly, it needed to be available on the desktop through the web. They also needed to publish the same information live on their website so that anybody can actually look at the information and get insights from that. And that's true data democracy. So we're not limited to people who have just access and licenses for viewing. We've actually opened it up to everybody. And then of course, the last piece was the OLAP analysis, which is available for analysts and deep dive. Now, we've come a long way, and I think we still have a long way to go. Giuseppe mentioned artificial intelligence, and that's certainly one of the things that as a team we're working with IHC on and their partners to look at ways where we can further use this information and not just report historic trends, but also start to predict what's going to happen in the future. The nature of aid is something that can't be predicted, but where there is famine and others that continuously are a constant, if you like, that's where, whether it's medicines or shelter, water, all of these things can be predicted reasonably well. And more importantly, having the stocks in the right time and the right place is that much more important. So I see the future building up on this base that we're building, but eventually we would like to take it to the point where we're starting to predict where we're gonna need more stocks, where we need to ship more, and at the same time be able to track all of our shipments so that the ports and the customs and the agencies on the receiving side have enough space and can create well in advance enough room to accommodate. For me, this is just the start of a great partnership with IHC, and I'd like to thank everybody who's been working with Intellytics. Of course, everything is dependent on the visionary and the leader, Giuseppe. A special thanks to him. He's been a great supporter. I've never seen him say no. And if anything, he's always pushing us to think about new things and what else can be done in the future using latest technologies. And I believe that we're at the cusp of greatness. And this would be a great legacy if we can get all of our hubs online and everybody has access to data that will eventually save millions and millions of lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir, for this interesting presentation. We have received in the chat several questions, but before that, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Noor Alnahhas, the CEO of nybl. As Mr. Sabah and the previous speaker mentioned, artificial intelligence is one of the tools that will be used to improve the collection of data and the sharing information, etc. So I would like to ask two questions to Mr. Noor Alnahhas. The reason why you have signed the MOU with IHC on this project, and can you please share your experience and findings after implementing the artificial intelligence tools in the data bank? So please, over to you.
Hi, Virginie and Giuseppe and Jum, thank you all for everything. The reason is really simple. One of the drivers in nybl and us as an organization is our belief that it is incumbent on those who develop advanced technologies to use that technology for the betterment of humankind. And the challenge is always, this is a great thing to say, it's not very easy to find a way to always do that. And by serendipity, I like to say, I met Giuseppe during the expo session where we spoke, and I saw he had the same vision of using intelligence and technology to improve the world or help the world. So the real simple answer is because we had the ability to do so, and we had somebody who was willing to help us also deliver. And we could see the enormous impact that we could do in our collaboration with IHC. And as Anjum said, they've done an incredible job in preparing all of the data to collect, which is the biggest challenge. What we're doing is now analyzing that data in order to help improve the response time, save lives, and increase the impact of the aid that's already been given. So how can we do more with what's already there? How can we make that more efficient? So really those were the reasons why, so that we can deliver on our promise as an organization and to help envision or deliver the dream that Giuseppe has as well. In terms of findings,
go ahead.
I can share some of the information that we've come up with and share those findings because it's very interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. The idea was to use nybl, which is our codeless machine learning framework, in collaboration with IHC to turn what is data-based predictions into what it needs to be is needs-based predictive models. And as I mentioned, the goal is to help humanitarian actors save lives. So predicting, preparing for disasters, turning from reactive to proactive. So we looked at how we can analyze forecasting items, time series, analytical data, and I'll show you some of the actual outcomes that we had. So if we look at the data for the past 3 years, this is the volume of invoiced items, meaning things that are received and exported. And the point here is just to start to look at analytics because I'm going to show you the intelligence we can move forward, what we've derived. So essentially what we did first was run the advanced analytics on the data to take from that to learn how we could make the predictions or improvements. So this is just imports or exports over time. We can see that in general, IHC is exporting more than it's importing, which gives us efficiency. They're very efficient in managing, and maybe there's a lot of stock that's being utilized. So there's a lot of aid being distributed. It's not just storage. Even if you look at the value of the transactions, okay, again, the value of the imports versus the exports and where they're going. This is just some information. Top 5 countries where each region, interesting enough, for example, you can see how Lebanon is really high, and this is skewed by the recent events there. But you can see where the key actors or where the key challenges are. If we wanted to talk about how do we start to optimize the focus and predict. And then the top 5 countries in each region where the most items were imported. So now if we go here, where are items going? And then here is where are the items coming from? Where's all this material coming from? All of this is to set the base to start to say, all right, if we analyze all this information and we combine this analytics, what can we do to get an outcome? And there's some really interesting things that we came up with. For example, the goal of IHC is the 11 hubs. And we'll talk about how one of the outputs of what we've done is a way to help optimize which hub could be the next one or the most important one to open next, for example, or to collect or connect or bring in on board with the system so that it can improve the delivery of aid, right? So let's look at one example. If we analyzed the items exported based on flood and cyclone for the African region. Okay, so we just did the categorization analysis of all items exported by IHC, the International Humanitarian City, in response to a flood or a cyclone in Africa. So you can see that in October of 2020, 490,000 items were exported. In September of 2021, 486,000 items were exported, okay? So this is interesting because we can see that it's the same similar response, same time span. So there's a way to potentially look at it, and we'll talk about the prediction or the forecasting next. And if you look at the same in the distribution of those items, so they didn't all go into one country, but where did those countries go? So flood and cyclone aid distributed in Africa from August 2020 until December of 2020, we can see that the majority of it, 555,000 items, went to Sudan. Small items went to Ethiopia, Sierra Leone, Mozambique, Madagascar. But I think we can all remember that during that time, Sudan had terrible floods during the pandemic as well. If we go into 2021, again, we had 496 or 86,000. You can see, if you look at the same period in 2021, once again, Sudan received the largest amount of aid, Kenya and Mozambique. So comparing, we have similarly Mozambique and Sudan, but Mozambique was very small here. Sudan is still very small in this area. This is still important to consider, to think about what we're about to suggest and in the response. So if we want to forecast flood and cyclone related item demand for Africa, America, and Asia. So we did this, let's take a look at. We look at the actuals, okay, and the forecast of what may happen in September of 2022. Okay, and based on our model, we're forecasting that so around September 2022, 473,600 items are going to be needed. Now, this is the first step. What we're working now is breaking every one of those items down to tell you what items were needed, when, and in which country, based on the models that were used before. It's look to prepare. And the idea would be, well, we've seen this pattern 2 years in a row. And as we build more data, the model becomes more and more intelligent and more robust. We're able to utilize. And one of the things we're going to add on top of it is external data, meaning we know that these two happened in the history of the data we have with IHC. What if we could then overlay it, well, not what if, we will overlay on top of this all the past 10 years of flood and cyclone disaster for Africa, for example. So can we create a pattern, because we know the response required. And so if we know that every October or September, there is a flood in Africa, usually affecting Sudan or Ethiopia or Kenya or Mozambique, then we can optimize so many things. We can optimize the material required. We can ship that material ahead of time. So we're not responding reactively or being proactive. We can be more efficient in the utilization of funds by, rather than shipping during, for example, a peak time or having to pay for expedited shipping or very high cost of logistics, being able to use a lower discounted cost of logistics because to move something at a different time, or rather than storing those materials in a hub in one location, storing them in a hub that's more efficient to transfer these items to the affected areas. And this is just one example. The idea is to do this across every type of response, to be able to enable the humanitarian relief to join this new intelligence of optimization. Take a look at example here in the forecasting. So if we want to look at the forecast in the Asian region, and we broke it down here. So this is just in general. And here we broke it down by the type of things. We picked three, so shelter, logistics, and water and sanitary. And you can see that there we forecast a drop in the requirement for logistics, a slight increase for shelter, but the largest demand and forecast for increase will be in water and sanitary. Once again, what we can do with this is in preparation of what type of humanitarian relief we need from the suppliers or the humanitarian actors, people who want to donate or provide or supply. Well, we believe we're going to need a lot more water and sanitary content items for relief. This is what we need support with. And being able to have that visibility also allows us to look at what type of storage, what type of logistics, what type of warehousing, and so on and so forth. Also looking at the type, just analyzing invoices over the last 3 years. If you look at the number of items, we can see the scale of invoice exports over imports. And then if we look at the forecast of what we believe the exports and imports will be for the next year. So we have our estimates and we have actuals. So this is really interesting. We'll be able to track it over the next 6 months for the year, 7 months of the year, and look at our predictions of our estimates versus the actual imports and exports that we believe will be happening. Again, to tune the model and update for better performance. We've done the forecast over different product clusters also. So logistics, shelter, telecom, sanitary, looking at both what we predict the imports and exports will be based on the last few years of history. Again, this could help in so many ways, from the supply chain, logistics, storage, facilities, handling, anything you can think of dealing and managing with these, will be able to help by understanding where we're going and what we think might happen. And as we tune the model with feedback, it will increase its accuracy in the predictions. One of the examples here, if we want to talk about pre-positioning items for Africa, right? So if we want to predict what are the items needed, okay, to be able to move and manage and prepare things in the right space. So if we look here, we can see both Asia and Africa have responses in the requirements of April 2023. We see a peak, and in Asia, October and December of 2022. Again, this is the same idea of what we looked at for Sudan in the floods in Africa, but this is looking at general response. The things that were shipped usually were shipped to these, exported to these regions during these times of year. The really cool part is what we call the root cause analysis next, because that allows you to create new prediction tools. So now we've done this, and we'll talk about how we're taking this next. But digging deep, identifying the cause of the need for these exports, and creating a tool that then forecasts those needs, meaning a cyclone, famine, whatever it may be, war, and then creating understanding the response required for each of these needs, and then using indicators, indexes, whatever may be available to predict the actual potential occurrence of the need generators, to be able to predict the requirement of aid for the next year, 2 years, and so on. Why is all of this? It's about a future of possibilities. And again, we're going to go back about helping humanitarian actors save lives by predicting and preparing for disasters. We cannot predict if a disaster will happen, but we can do is look at what's happened in the past and get an indication of what we're going to do. So the number one is looking at the IHC hubs, improving efficiency of importing and exporting products, and the disaster prediction. But our first attempt was what we looked at is something called the Humanitarian Needs Satisfaction Index. So we like to create a way to be able to measure and improve impact. Everything we've done is just the first step, and this is just a couple of weeks of work. So you can imagine the excitement in what we can deliver together with IHC as we work more and more with them, as we dig deeper, as we put the drivers, the causes to create more outcome. But one thing we did generate is this Humanitarian Needs Satisfaction Index. This is a work in progress, just a concept, but we wanted to present it here because we believe it can create a significant value across the board. And the idea is a concept for a level of service charge. So if we look at, level of service charge, what do we mean by that? It's looking at the quantitative, needs versus qualitative needs, and how do we optimize? Meaning quantitative needs is on this, your left-hand side, looking at your Y chart, Y-axis, looking at how much resource per person is spent per region in US dollar. Okay, so quantitative. How much relief, humanitarian aid has been sent? The qualitative is a new one, which is the satisfaction of needs. So what we did is we created a cluster of needs classification. This is again still to be validated, perfected, but we found these segments. So you can food security, shelter, health, logistics, protection, emergency telecoms, education, water, and sanitary. Okay, and the idea here is when we send aid, how many of the needs, today is just all the needs. The next iteration we're working on this now is to validate what of the humanitarian needs were required for each disaster. So for example, in a flood, you may not need education. So it's not accurate to say, well, you didn't get education, so you get only 9 out of 8 or 8 out of 9, sorry. But today is looking at all of them. And the idea is it's measuring the best utilization of humanitarian relief. And the goal would be to push countries to the right, right? And then to drop them down where you are getting the most satisfaction of need at the most efficient rate. And the idea here is not to analyze who's, but to see where we can pay attention. So for example, Haiti and Rwanda get the highest quantitative, but from a qualitative perspective, and again, this is just the initial, and again, probably because of the relief, we need to categorize the needs classification, but they only got 0.15 of the qualitative satisfaction of needs. And so the question is, did we ship the wrong things? Did we give them the wrong aid? Did we not give them the right aid? It allows us to evaluate and improve humanitarian relief response. So this is just an idea we're working on. We will be developing it further with IHC, but just to give a glimpse of the possibilities of what can be done when you apply AI and machine learning to the data that Giuseppe, the IHC team, and Intellytics and Anjum has been putting together. So we're very excited to continue working with the team to build this value to help improve and help humanitarian actors save lives. And this is our goal. That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, sir, for this presentation. We can see that artificial intelligence provides solutions to the key challenges that the humanitarian community is facing. So thank you very much. I'm now going to give the floor to participants. We already have questions in the chat, and then I will give the floor to the participant in the room. The first question is, are you able to link with ACICUDA and GS1, either or preferably both, for data and customs clarity?
Let us move step by step. We are already doing a huge effort. For sure, the fact that we are trying to figure out with the right HS code should help somehow at certain point to facilitate the dialogue, in the sense that this is substantially based on customs transactions. I'm pretty sure that at a certain point, those customs that are using the ACICUDA should be quite confident, but this should be part of next step. It's part of the plan, let me say, but it's not going to happen tomorrow morning for sure. Thank you.
UNCTAD is represented and they have developed ACICUDA. Do you want to say a few words on this? Over to you, John.
Yeah, just to add that, like my colleague said, it's not for tomorrow, but technologically speaking, the platform is open to exchange the data in a dynamic and in the way that's required by both parties. So it's very open on both sides.
Thank you very much. The other questions is about APIs. Are APIs available to link external systems from other agencies, NGOs, or countries?
Today we were just mapping humanitarian hubs. Tomorrow, I believe that with the dialogue that we are opening with Ipsos, we may expand, but let's us focus today, honestly, on these two main pillars: humanitarian hubs, hosting stocks for international response, humanitarian hubs at national response, how the two systems can talk together, and going back to the previous question, how the systems even can deal together with the Assikuda system.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is, how does the dovetail overlap with the work from ESUPS, also working with other agencies, other UNHRD offices, and the collaboration with Gurobi and their forecasting analysis stock positioning?
Well, again, this is a job which has been done by the humanitarian community. And for those that had the opportunity of seeing the video, UNHRD is into the page. Come on, for those who knows my personal history knows quite well that I'm the founder of UNHRD. So, and it's a sort of per default, I'm working together with UNHRD. Per default, I'm working together with Ipsos, and to consider an overlapping, no, it's just a combination of efforts together, again, for providing the affected countries first, and secondly, the humanitarian community with the best of the support. Today, I'm representing a government. Yesterday, I used to represent the humanitarian community. I'm still an animal that is floating in between the two parts of donor and humanitarians. So I'm here today, and I'm continuously discussing with the colleagues for the best of the cooperation. When I have been involved into the Assikuda, and my colleague Giard is, let me say, the most involved colleague on the IHC side, well, extremely, let me say, happy to cooperate with Assikuda, to cooperate with UNCTAD, to cooperate with the World Customs Organization and so on. Here, there is no flags, and I don't intend to bring any flag on top or down. Absolutely, this is simply based on cooperation.
Thank you, Giuseppe. We have the project manager of ESUPS. Do you want to say a few words on this question and add something? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you for the floor. Thank you for the presentation. I just would like to back what Giuseppe has just said. We, Stockholm and the ESUPS project, we're mostly working at national level, and we have definitely similar approach around the way we look at relief item group versus HS code, where it's definitely a way to connect. We are doing work at mapping the stock at national level, which we can't use the custom information. So we have our own challenge in getting the information from the agency when you have challenge of when getting custom information from the customs. But definitely it's not an overlap, it's a complementarity. When something is done with the IHC and the data bank, mostly at regional level, we're mostly doing it at national level. Maybe to also answer the second part of the question around the collaboration with Gurobi, we recently signed an agreement with Gurobi Optimization, and I was quite interested in looking at what was happening in terms of IA, potentially looking at future forecasts. We're mostly working on the basis of the last 40 years of disaster, so mostly looking on what happened before, but we would be very interested with Gurobi and potentially others to work on also looking at what should come next. If I may just finish by this, I think there's also potentially a collaboration around looking at what they have in country and looking at how what they don't have in country could also be a way to inform what should be kept at regional level. So that could be also a way to collaborate on defining the future needs as well. So definitely a lot of work to do together. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Florent. We also have a question from a participant online, Mr. Fahad Shamim. Can you take the floor? Otherwise, you put your question in the chat. Can he take the floor when we are in a webinar? Mr. Fahad, please go ahead. Perhaps I have to. Okay, please, it should be okay now, Mr. Shamim. Over to you. Can you hear us? Please unmute. Ask to unmute. I click on a button, but otherwise, please ask your question in the chat. Mr. Shamim, do you hear us? No question from my side. Okay, sorry. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to give the floor to the participant. Yes, please, sir, go ahead. Introduce yourself and please ask your question.
Thank you so much for all that you guys have done in the world. It's really quite amazing, the analytical tool set that you have put together. I love the fact that you have this deep dive data that gives you predictive analytics. I ask about the region. I know Dubai plays a very critical role in humanitarian outreach throughout the world. The neighbors over there in Qatar are spending over $200 billion to host the World Cup. How can this amazing organization collaborate with Qatar after the World Cup to repurpose some of those very valuable assets into the humanitarian corridor? Because I know for a fact that it would be amazing to go ahead and implement your tool set into assisting repurposing anything after the World Cup that would find a happy home and give people some solidarity.
Are you referring to, let me say, to the humanitarian community in general or at the level of hosting governments?
Truly, my reference is I like to see more inclusiveness. And I know at times, sometimes sports can bring the world focus into a particular region. But after the World Cup, there's going to be a lot of physical assets that should be put back into the needs of the communities globally. And I do firmly believe that your amazing tool set and your ability to go ahead and work within NGOs throughout the world might be able to lend some help in helping facilitate those assets back to the world. I know this is a pretty bold quest. Oftentimes you're working with cultural differences, but I'm just asking to see if we can implement all your skills and all your knowledge into something that could repurpose assets. I mean, we all know that $200 billion is a significant amount of money to host an event, but I believe that you have something that's truly unique and can help, again, repurpose those assets.
Honestly speaking, I don't have absolutely any answer on this, considering that we are talking about assets which belongs to totally another country and so on. I believe that I can talk just on behalf of what the Dubai government is doing for the humanitarian community. Yes, it's the largest humanitarian hub in the world, and became the largest humanitarian hub because the humanitarian community decided to elect home in Dubai by taking into consideration, let me say, the advantages of the logistics capacity, about the strategic position, considering that, let me say, there is quite a lot, let me say, of there is a strong outreach out of Dubai, especially when we talk about outreach, the 2/3 of the world population that are around in the region, Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Africa, and so on. And again, this is a strong cooperation that has been done in between the humanitarian community and the government of Dubai, developed almost, correct me if I'm wrong, Anan, in the past 18 years, since 2003. So, and the fact that those data that we showed before in the growth of the stocks preposition in Dubai are significant, let me say, based on the decision taken by the humanitarian organizations. Yes, the Gulf is an area where we have multiple countries which are encouraging, of course, all the humanitarian organizations, not only in Qatar, but also in Saudi Arabia and so on, Kuwait. And of course, I believe that is each government has the freedom of offering whatever they can have in their own hands in order to support the humanitarian community. More than this, honestly speaking, I am not able to add to your question. Thanks a lot anyway.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. We are now going to go to the next session on ASIREC. ASIREC stands for Automated System for Relief Consignment. When I worked with OCHA, I was looking for information about relief items, and I was wondering how I can get information on relief items that are coming into a country. And then I knocked at the door as UNCTAD when I was working in OCHA, and we worked on technical specifications, and we initiated discussions to create a system. I left OCHA in December 2020, but UNCTAD continued the work and is going to update us on the platform that is under development. So we have with you a guest speaker, which is Mr. John David from UNCTAD, based here in Geneva. And can you please provide us an update on the ASIREC project, please? Over to you.
Thank you, Virginie. Good morning to everybody. Could I have the next slide, please? So an update on the ASIREC initiative as introduced by Virginie just now. So we'll start by giving you some context of this cooperation. Next slide, please. So just the background of the cooperation that's been going on with OCHA and other entities. It started in 2014. This was a memorandum of understanding between UNCTAD ASICUDA program and OCHA to set out the plan to develop and implement an IT solution for the clearance of relief consignments in member states in customs administrations. A first prototype was presented in HNPW in 2016. In 2017, the ASIREC concept was nominated for a UN Secretary General Award. And in 2018, in the Oceania region, initiative on the working group, customs and humanitarian relief was held amongst various nations of the region, all who use ASICUDA as their customs IT solution. More recently, between the last, let's say in the last 2-3 years, the ASIREC has been mentioned in UN CFAC recommendation 44 and 47, and also in the World Customs Organization, RKC. This is an ongoing document. Next slide, please. So what about in 2022? Where are we? Next slide, please. So we defined throughout the years, and we've streamlined this more recently, in that ASIREC is not just a software component that you install and then run and use in any country. there's a whole process involved and a procedure involved, which starts now up until any emergency stage will happen. So it's a constant activity. And the phase one, which is known as pre-emergency and preparatory stage, is preparing for any national disaster that will happen in the future. And it'd be nice to say that hopefully it'll never happen, but we know it's happening more and more around the world. So in the phase one, the aim is to establish a list of emergency relief items with the appropriate HS codes, to set the applicable procedures and simplifications in line with OCHA Model Customs Agreement, but other regional and national legislation and agreements. Self-registration of any entity that will be involved in relief operations who deem it necessary to be involved at the time, and to provide any eligible organization and humanitarian cargo. This will be done through simplified customs declaration, relief from import duties, and temporary admission. But that phase is critical because it's a preparatory phase, which anything done at this stage will reduce the time and effort that is needed during the phase two, which is of course the actual emergency itself. So in phase two is to record the emergency initiation, the duration, the government to prioritize relief items, including quantities, and activate the actual list of eligible organizations. Now remember, if in phase one there are items which have not been established, organizations not registered, that can still be done in phase two. It's an ongoing dynamic phase. In phase two, there'll be the actual pre-arrival lodgement of electronic customs declaration directly through ASIREC, through the organization's representatives, and they should be flagged for humanitarian relief. And then process the arrival with coordination of controls, risk management, but not heavy risk management, and through fully automated processing, and of course, a quick release of goods, which is the most important factor in terms of time, and one of the bottlenecks that has been readily mentioned over the last 20, 30 years. Phase three, which is termination of the emergency and post-emergency, this is where we record the end of the emergency procedure, perform post-audit and assessment of humanitarian operators' compliance, and update the list of items and eligible organizations, which shows that these two are the important things that need to keep going through phases 1, 2, and 3. Next slide, please. So we mentioned in the previous slide the actors. Now, who are all the actors involved in this process? It's important to identify these actors long before anything happens and to include them in the process from the earliest phase possible. Naturally, we talk about customs, but the NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, which exists in most member states, will be heavily involved. Cross-border regulatory agencies, international organizations, any other assisting states, and the private sector. And these actors will be the ones involved in the 10 main business processes that we have defined along with the actors during our experience and discussions over the last 8 years. So the 10 main business processes is automation of the self-registration process for humanitarian actors, and this is where we talk about automation with ASIREC. Authorization processes with use of integrated authorization, coordination and cooperation between all actors involved, the simplified declaration itself with which nothing's going to happen, orchestration of the workflow, pre-arrival processing for immediate release of relief consignment, so to lodge the declaration as early as possible before the goods arrive so that they can be cleared very quickly, define limited but efficient risk management, coordination of all the controls, and then humanitarian cargo process monitoring, and finally, post-clearance audit. Once things have gone through, then to look back and learn and benefit from the lessons that have been learned. Next slide, please. So we talked about the logistics data bank this morning and the use of data. So ASIREC, the idea is that it will have, in a member state, it will contain all the information of what has been actually cleared by customs during an emergency phase. So post-importation humanitarian consignments, tracking and tracing will enable end-to-end visibility. And the information that can be as output of ASIREC could be the registration of stakeholders, which will be involved during the actual emergency phase, registration of storage and distribution facilities, the actual recording of operation and transactional events, what products arrived and where, the receipts, dispatch of registered facility at the national level warehouse, inventory management, of course, and to record the delivery to the final destination and beneficiary, to be able to track and trace exactly what happened from beginning to end. Next slide, please. Now we'll talk about the humanitarian relief information portal that we are working on in ASIREC. Next slide, please. So basically, we're going to talk in terms of this image here. And this is an example that we are working on in ASIREC. So any member state will be able to provide online real-time information about, first of all, customs, where they are, where they're located, when they are open, and what you need to do to be able to clear your goods in customs, in particular during an emergency phase. And it should also identify through a dynamic map the NDMA, all the details of the NDMA and how you should work with the NDMA if you need to. And we'll also hope to provide any information on other regulatory agencies involved in the process so that there's one common information point to know where or who the actors are involved in the emergency process. Next slide, please. The last word is about our e-learning platform. Next slide, please. So we have been developing an e-learning platform, which is for ASICUDA as a whole, but there is a rather large component already about humanitarian relief and ASIREC. And this, at the moment, we have 3 modules, which are listed here, with videos and presentations with a lot of key information. And we're continuing to develop this e-learning platform, especially for ASIREC, to be able to provide an online training facility for all regions of the world, and to be able to have it accessed 24/7 and not just during occasional seminars or training sessions. So thank you very much. That concludes my presentation. We are ready for questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. I'm looking in the chat whether there are questions on ASIREC. No, it's about the annual report of IHC. Are there any questions in the room and the participant here? One question in the chat is ASIREC free?
ASIREC, like any ASICUDA project, I would say, ASIREC comes within the context of a technical assistance agreement between UNCTAD and between the member state. So the software or the component itself is free, but the technical assistance project comes with the necessary funding for training, staff, or any other personnel that is required. The component, yes, is free, but the technical assistance program within the context has a certain cost, yes.
Thank you, John. Are there any other questions? No? Okay, so thank you very much. I would like to thank Mr. Giuseppe Sama, CEO of IHC. Thank you, UNCTAD and John, for their presentation. This session will be has been recorded, so it will be shared on the platform of the event here at the HNPW. For those that are here in the room, I invite you to take a coffee close to the exhibition area. And thank you to the participants that are online. The next session is about the importation of medicines and medical equipment in West Africa. This is a session that is co-convened by IMPACT, by the African Union Commission and the World Customs Organization Regional Office for West and Central Africa. So you are more than welcome to join the session if you are interested to talk about the constraints to import medicines and medical equipment and to find and identify potential solutions together. Thank you very much to all. Have a great day and let's keep in touch. And otherwise, see you next year in Geneva at the HNPW. Thank you very much. Bye bye.